Howdy, folks. This is Big Sam. About now, you might be wondering to yourself, Self, why did I just click on a YouTube video that's titled Mosin Nagant, Moldy Leprosy? Now that's a really good question, and I'm kind of asking myself why you clicked on this video as well. But since I have you here, let me explain a little bit, all right? We're going to be taking a look today at a couple of Mosin Nagant rifles that came out of a batch that was imported and sold last year by Classic Firearms. I guess technically it was 2 years ago. It was around the fall of 2020 these rifles were sold. And these rifles are hopefully are going to be infamous, because I think a lot of people have figured out that these are sort of and we're going to get into that. And I'm going to show you how to identify this. So what is this Moldy Leprosy batch that we're talking about? Well, some of the rifles I think were really good. Now, the way Classic Firearms was selling these was you could do all sorts of combinations. You could go for like a really nice extra goon and pay a lot of money. Or you could be like Big Sam and go for the absolute cheapest thing possible. And they had a lot of those, apparently. What that was wartime produced Mosin Nagant 9130s, as we can see here. This one was produced in 1941 by the Izhevsk factory, okay? And what was called cracked stock it had. Now, some of them were like a two-piece splice that was sort of coming undone. Some were just cut in half. You didn't really know what to expect. But they didn't talk a lot about the condition. Now, I wasn't really worried about it when these were ordered, because I'd never really seen refurbished 9130s like this that had a lot of problems, like cosmetically, like with things like rust, okay? So, I was like, well, I'll just get the cheapest ones possible. So how did that go? Well, you might notice that this particular one is from that batch, and it's in an Archangel stock. And I think this might help explain my position on this. So when I got this rifle, actually got 3 rifles, and they came in stocks. One of them, the back of it was cracked, like the bottom half of it was cracked. Don't worry, that something fell, but when you see it, you won't feel bad. Okay, so the first stock, this whole section right here was just cracked off entirely, okay? Then another one was like a splice, and then I forget about the other one, but there are 3 rifles in this batch that I got. Now, the stocks are gone because I threw them away. Now, why did I throw them away? Well, that's a good question, because as you know, I collect a lot of junk, like this. This was in a fire. This is an old Mosin barrel in a fire. This is terrible. I don't throw away a ton of stuff, especially with Mosins, because everything's worth a little bit of money, or someone can use it. But we're going to get into why we threw that away. That's going to come into the moldy part. First, I want to talk a little bit more about the leprosy part, okay? Now, the leprosy, we're going to look at this gun. Now, there's a bit of a disclaimer. I don't want to insult any of our good friends down in Texas who may have contracted leprosy from eating a roadkill armadillo. So just get that out of the way. Okay, I'm sorry for any of those of y'all in Texas that get offended by this. Let's take a look at the leprosy. Now, what I'm going to do here, as you can see, I've got a bipod, so I'm going to deploy that. Some of y'all have been asking about a rail as well, a no-tap rail. So here's a little sneak peek in a future video. We're going to be taking a look at this. Let's deploy the bipod here so I can set this upright. Okay, I give you leprosy, and lots of it. All right, I've never seen this type of rust this bad on a refurbished 9130 rifle. And that's because normally when these were refurbished, they were all nice and they were stored properly. Now this batch was not stored properly, okay? And there's more evidence of this if we come back here on the receiver. There's a little bit of pitting. This is not bad, trust me. You're gonna see far worse than this later. We can see some messed up things here on the bolt. This one's actually one of the nicer examples I've seen. we can see all throughout the barrel here, there's all this rust. And I actually spent a decent amount of time cleaning this up. Now, whoever was in, I guess, Eastern Europe that sold these to the importer, they did some kind of nefarious things. One of the shady things they did, you'll see on this, there are remnants of all this black paint. They actually covered all the rust in black paint so you couldn't really see it. No, Classic Firearms did not do that at all. That was the shady Eastern European guys. You can kind of see remnants of the black paint still here as well. Now, the paint I just cleaned off with our trusty bronze brush that we use all the time here on the channel. Worked fine, just took a lot of elbow grease because it was everywhere. But that wasn't really the issue. The issue was what was under that black paint. All this rust. Okay, so this is fine. The stock got thrown away. Again, we'll talk about that more in a little bit. Let me show you the butt plate, which I saved. Here's that black paint. I've scrubbed a lot of it off. It was just really horrible. But if you look on the back here, this is not good, and this is a pretty good indication of what the rest of the gun and the metal and the stock sort of looked like. Ugh, this is not good. I did not know what I was getting into. Okay. Now, you might have heard something drop earlier. Maybe it cleaned off some of the rust, but let's take a look at that now. Oh, and I'm getting all sorts of junk on me as I'm touching this. I give you Moldy Leprosy, the sequel. This I have not spent a lot of time cleaning up yet. And as you can see, this is not good, folks. This still has the black paint on it. You can see all this pitting it's covered up. Okay. All throughout the barrel, and you'll see more of the black paint up here. Now, even though there's black paint, even on the parts that aren't really pitted, they just covered the entire thing. So whoever stored these in Eastern Europe didn't do it properly, and these rusted. I feel like these actually rusted fairly recently from judging by like the stocks, which I'll talk about. Now, are these guns like safe? Are they fine? Well, I haven't shot any yet, but they appear to be functionally perfectly fine. And what's actually funny is the bores on these rifles, and even this rifle, are really nice. Imagine that. So thankfully, the rust didn't get all inside the barrel. It was just all over. So the real issue with these is, one, they look kind of horrible and ugly. But if you're like me, you don't really care. You know, some people do. The real pain is just cleaning all this up. It's a huge pain. We can see all sorts of rust back in here. Look at all this horrible leprosy. Yeah. It's not good. But, you know, it should still work just fine, theoretically. So, from a functional aspect, I'm not really worried about this. I was just a little disappointed about the condition of these rifles. The cosmetics, if you will. But they were relatively affordable, so for the price that I paid, you know, I'm not super disappointed about the price. It's just that this was a lot of unintended work, and as you can see, even since 2020, I still haven't even gotten to this yet. This is just not good. Now, there was another one, and it wasn't quite as bad. Most of the pitting was, let me get my camera to zoom in here. Most of the pitting was right kind of on the chamber area. It actually looked a lot better than this. Now, what's horrible is, on places like Gunbroker, I've actually seen guns from this batch that are way, way worse than this. And I'm not sure if those even had good bores. So I actually consider myself relatively lucky because some of the ones I've seen, just not good. Now, how do you identify one of those? Like I said, I'm not going to tell you to not buy one of these. But if you are going to buy one of these, I would like for you to at least know what you're getting into, because I didn't. These guns are going to be from this batch, and the way to tell, you want to look here. They have this batch of the infamous Moldy Leprosy is going to have this import marking here. It'll say made in Russia under the left side of the sight base here. State Factory M9130. So if you see, this is a very unusual import marking to see, and I've really only seen it on this batch of rifles. Now again, if your rifle has this, that doesn't mean it's Moldy Leprosy, because it could have been one of the really nice ones. But if you have one, if you're looking at pictures of a Mosin on the internet, and it has this like weird black paint, and some of them I've seen, it'll look like they were just like in relic condition, just pitting everywhere, and they're just covered all in black, and it just looks wrong. Make sure to see if it has this marking here, because if it does, it's probably Moldy Leprosy, and you may or may not want that in your life. And I can assure you one thing, your wife definitely will not want you to bring home Moldy Leprosy. Okay, so we've covered the leprosy part, and I'm going to set this away so I don't want to get all this rust on our table here. Ugh. Ooh, it's just, you can hear the rust falling off. Look at that. So what about the moldy part, right? We call this Moldy Leprosy. Well, it wasn't bad enough that the guns looked horrible and were covered in rust, and I had to spend a lot of time cleaning them up. Once I took the stock off, it was sort of like one of those haunted houses that you might go to. Or maybe spending some time in Washington, D.C. in the halls of Congress. It was one of the most disturbing things I'd ever seen. And I wasn't prepared for what I was about to see, because for most of my life, I've lived here in Colorado. And if you don't know about Colorado, it's extremely dry here. And there's no such thing really as mold just sitting out, because it'll die. There's no moisture. I mean, even when it rains here, it's dry. After like 5 minutes, the ground just absorbs it, and you can't even tell it rained. It's that dry here. There's no humidity in the air, almost. You can't feel it like you can in, like, say, Texas or someplace. Now, Texas is bad because you can get Moldy Leprosy, because you can get the mold, and they have armadillos there, so you got to watch out. But again, when I took the stock off, I didn't really know what I was looking at. I took off the handguard, and what I saw was, I actually thought it was a bundle of spider webs, just really thick spider webs. And I said, no, a spider got in here. And it was all under the handguard. Let me get handguard. It was all under here. It looked like thick spider webs. And I said, what's that? Then I thought about it some more. And then I looked at how horrible this gun was. And then I knew there was moisture in there. And then I thought about it some more in disbelief. And then I said, you know what? I don't think this is spider webs. I think this is like really thick mold. And I think I don't want any part of this in my life. And I wish I didn't bring this into my house. Yeah. So what happened was in hindsight, I wouldn't have done this again. I tried to actually save the stocks of the handguards. Some of the handguards actually may have saved one or two, but the stocks was, I try not to even remember it. It brings back horrible memories of the Moldy Leprosy. Maybe we can bring back some more memories on Halloween. I'm probably still not prepared for that. It's too soon. The stocks, what I did was I just got a big old bottle of spray can, like it's got the trigger on it, you spray it, and I filled it mostly with water with a little bit of vinegar, and the vinegar was supposed to get rid of the mold, and it kind of did, but it also really took off a lot of this finish, and like the varnish in the stocks, just coupled with the fact that they were cracked and they still had mold on there, and a lot of this rust came off of the gun. It was embedded in the stock. And I said to myself, you know what? I'm not going to use these. And while someone may use this if they had the opportunity, I really don't want someone to have the opportunity to use one of these stocks because it's that horrible. So they got yeeted into the dumpster. A textbook definition of a dumpster fire would be Moldy Leprosy stocks. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why you see this guy in an Archangel stock, as the stock's gone. And I thought, well, you know what? I'll get a kick out of this because it's great. All the rust here is exposed. You can see it. And like I said, though, the bore's pretty good. So if we can get this to be a pretty good shooter, I just think this would be the funniest thing of all time if we can get Moldy Leprosy in an Archangel stock and go shoot some nice groups. So we might do a little bit more testing of that when we check out this rail in our future video. Now, this one I named David Chipman in honor of the would-be ATF director. Unfortunately, we didn't get David Chipman, but we will not forget David Chipman, so we named this Mosin David Chipman. Now, this one, with the rust dripping off of it, I haven't named yet, and we like to name Mosins here on the channel, so if you think of a name for this Moldy Leprosy, right now he's just Moldy Leprosy 2, like the bad sequel. If you got a good name for this one, go ahead and post it in the comments, because I'd love to hear it. I'm sure you can think of some really clever names for this one. So again, if you see a weird Mosin on the internet and it's like very well priced, maybe under $200-300 even, make sure to look for this import marking to see if it is Moldy Leprosy. Because again, you probably don't want this in your house. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you learned a little bit about Moldy Leprosy and something to maybe be aware of in the future. This is one of the few Mosin Nagant landmines there are in the market right now. Now, if you do have one of these, you shouldn't feel too bad because it's still a cool gun. And this one's perfectly fine because the mold is gone now, and we're going to go shoot this. But just something to be aware of. So again, thank you guys for watching. Let me know what y'all would like to see next. And let me know if y'all have any prayer requests. And I'll see you next time.